we come to the last and final Imam in which we will study, and that is the life and times of the great muhaddith, the great scholar of hadith. And this is what he was very well known for, the great scholar Al-Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah ta'ala. And we mentioned that he is going to be the last one that we study, because in terms of birthright, he is the last one to be born. And as far as the year that he was born is concerned, he was born in the year 164 after the Hijrah, year 164. Scholars had described this Imam as being the Imam of the entire world. They call him the Imam of the dunya, the Imam of the world. He was a leader of the Sunnah. He was a master of patience. He was known for these things. He was known for his extraordinary patience. Other scholars such as Imam al-Shafi'i and others called him the Mujaddid, the reviver of the religion when he was alive during the third generation. And as we mentioned, he was known, he became very famous for his knowledge in hadith. It was said that Imam Ahmad rahimahullah memorized more than 1,000,000 hadith. And there's a very famous story that two men came to him and asked him, you know, how is it possible for someone to memorize 1,000,000 hadith? How is this possible? And Imam Ahmad rahimahullah answered with a very famous statement, saying that every hadith that I memorize, I practice it. And this is how I've memorized all of this ahadith. Lesson here for us. The more you memorize, if you want to keep what you have memorized, especially from ahadith or from the Quran, if you want this knowledge to stay with you, this is the #1 way to do so, is that you practice your knowledge. So anybody who recites something of the Quran or their ayah, they want it to stay with them and stay in their hearts, then one of the things that you can do, which is the most effective way to thabbit al-ilm, is to make the knowledge firm in your hearts and in your life, is that you practice it. And this is a responsibility that all of us have. In terms of his birth, he was born in Baghdad, and as we mentioned, the year 164. He became very famous for his lineage as Ahmad ibn Hanbal. But Hanbal is not the name of his father, it's actually the name of his grandfather. The name of his father is Muhammad. So if you want to have the lineage correctly, it's actually Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Hanbal. Okay. However, his grandfather became famous, and so his lineage automatically went to his grandfather. And the reason for this is that some of the opinions that scholars have is that his grandfather was very famous. He was a soldier, and so he was very famous for his bravery onto the battlefield and his courageousness that he displayed. His father died at a young age. His father died when Imam Ahmad rahimahullah was at a young age. And Imam Ahmad himself says that he doesn't even remember seeing his father. He doesn't remember his father at all. In terms of his mother's name was Safiya, and she used to, and herself and the family, they used to have a business where they would sell thobes. And sometimes Al-Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, he used to act as a carrier, meaning he used to carry people, and he would act as what we would call a taxi cab. So he would have a little trolley, and he would have someone sitting there, and he would carry them wherever they wanted to go. So this is one of the jobs that Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, you could call a taxi boy or something like this, of this nature. He made Hajj 5 times in his life. 3 of them he walked from Baghdad to Mecca. He walked the entire distance. 3 times he's done this. In terms of Al-Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, his upbringing in terms of seeking knowledge. Of course, like all the scholars, what is the first thing he began with? What is the first thing that all the scholars begin with? Is memorize the Quran. So Al-Imam Ahmad, of course, began by memorizing the Quran and done this at a very young age. And then also he began studying the Arabic language. He used to wake up before Fajr and begin to study. Whilst everyone else was sleeping, Al-Imam Ahmad used to wake up before Fajr, and this is when he would start to seek his knowledge and memorize. He traveled to Mecca, to Medina, to Sham, to Yemen, and many other countries, so much so that the people used to ask him, when are you going to stop traveling? Because they noticed that he was traveling so much, and they would ask him, when are you going to stop traveling so much? And he said, Wallahi, I will continue to seek knowledge until I enter my grave. So until he enters his grave, he will continue to seek knowledge. Some of the scholars, them, rahmatullahi alayhim, mention one of the main reasons why he did a lot of traveling. One of the main prime reasons is to seek a hadith. He would go and collect hadith from various scholars that he would hear about. And once he went to Sham to collect hadith from a very, very famous scholar. He met the scholar and he found that that scholar was feeding a dog. He was feeding a dog. So Imam Ahmad rahimahullah sat and he observed this. And as he's watching this great scholar whom he came to learn from and get hadith from, he watched him that he would give this dog some food and he would give this dog a drink and then he would leave the dog. And so Imam Ahmad rahimahullah went and approached him and asked him, why do you do this? And the scholar replied and said, are you surprised? Are you surprised to see me do something like this? And he said, yes, na'am, of course. You know, you're feeding a dog. So the scholar replied to a very famous statement of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that anybody who provides help for someone in this dunya, then Allah Azza wa Jal will relieve him of some sort of pain on the Day of Judgment in the Akhirah. And Imam Ahmad rahimahullah heard this and he said, this is enough for me. What I have come for, the purpose that I have come to see you and meet you has been fulfilled, and Imam Ahmad rahimahullah left him. As far as his teachers are concerned, and as you can see, we're just going to zoom over these categories. He met Abu Yusuf rahimahullah. Who did we say Abu Yusuf is? Abu Yusuf is the student of what famous Imam? He was the number one student of an Imam we've discussed. Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. His number one most famous student is Abu Yusuf. And so Al-Imam Ahmad rahimahullah also studied with him. He learned hadith, he learned fiqh, and actually Abu Yusuf was one of his very first teachers. However, there were many more famous teachers and scholars that Al-Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, from them there is one by the name of rahimahullah, who was a great scholar in hadith in Baghdad. Also Al-Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah was one of his closest teachers, and actually Al-Imam Ahmad rahimahullah loved Al-Imam Shafi'i, loved him so much that he considered him to be like a father to him, only for knowledge, nothing else. They had no other connection with themselves except when it came to seek knowledge, and eventually when all of them were recognized as A'imma. He met Al-Imam Shafi'i in Mecca when he went for Hajj, and from there he began to study from him in Masjid al-Haram in Mecca. And as we mentioned, the love that between Imam Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad was so strong that Al-Imam Ahmad rahimahullah was constantly invited by Imam Shafi'i to come with him. Wherever Imam Shafi'i traveled, Al-Imam Ahmad would follow along, and he was invited by Al-Imam Shafi'i himself. Al-Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah once made a statement that he wished to study with Imam Malik. He wished to study from him. However, according to many of the ulama, Imam Ahmad rahimahullah was still young when Al-Imam Malik passed away. And so this was one of the reasons why some of the scholars say that Al-Imam Malik or Imam Ahmad never had an opportunity to study from him. Another category that we wish to discuss is that we realize that as we mentioned, he was known for seeking knowledge throughout his entire life. And as we mentioned, the people used to be stumbled by this, to see that how is it possible for somebody to travel so often, spend so many hours a day seeking knowledge. This was the patience of Al-Imam Ahmad. Al-Imam Ahmad rahimah, he was not somebody that was very popular and known for memorizing. And he himself, he himself stated that he was not somebody that focused on memorizing. Now the question comes, how did he memorize 1 million hadith, then the Quran and all the other branches of knowledge that he memorized? How did all of this come and enter his heart? Principle here when seeking knowledge, the more piety that someone possesses, the cleaner heart they have, the more Allah Azza wa Jal will teach that person and cause their memory to reach to such an extent that whatever they hear, sometimes they will hear it for the first time, and it would only take one instance. They would listen to some type of knowledge and immediately they would memorize it. And such was the case for many of the scholars, especially Al-Imam Al-Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala. He was known for this, for his memory and how strong his memory was. There's a very famous story of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, in where 10 people came to him, and each of them had a hadith that they wanted Imam Bukhari rahimahullah to judge and to give them the ruling regarding these ahadith. And what they would do is that each of them would come and they would state the entire lineage of that hadith, the names, the narrators in that hadith, then state the hadith, and then they would ask Imam Bukhari, what is the ruling on this? So 10 of them came at once. Each of them had one hadith. So Imam Bukhari says, wait, okay. All of you line up. You, number one, tell me what you have. The person would begin to narrate all the names and then the hadith. And you'd say, stop. Number two, same thing. Number three, same thing. And he will go like this and reach the 10th person. And when he finished, he will say, number one, you said to me, and he would repeat the entire hadith. Here is the ruling. Number two, you said to me, and he would repeat all the names of that narrator and the hadith, and he would say, this is the ruling regarding this. And he would do this for all and each and every one of them until he reached the 10th person. How is it possible for someone to have memory like this? Al-Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah, as we mentioned last week, when he would open a book, he would take one of his hands and he would cover the page that he wasn't looking at, because he was afraid that if he looked at it, he would memorize the entire page. So he would cover it. And yes, it is possible for someone to reach this extent in their memory, and this goes back to the piety of that person. As Allah Azza wa Jal says in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَيُعَلِّمُكُمُ اللَّهِ. If you have fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah Azza wa Jal will teach you. Very important ayah when seeking the knowledge of Al-Islam. And as a teacher, how was Imam Ahmad rahimahullah as a teacher? He began teaching in one of the main masjids in Baghdad, and he was at the age of 40 when he began teaching. Scholars have two opinions why this happened. Now imagine Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, 40 years old, and now he begins to teach. Number one of the reasons that scholars put out why Imam Ahmad waited this long to begin to teach is that he had respect for his teachers and the knowledge that they possessed. Meaning that those teachers that he learned from, they superseded him. They were older than him, or they had more knowledge than him, and as long as he was a student to them, he remained this way. So respect and honor for those who were around him. Another opinion, the second opinion that ulama have, and this Allah Azza wa Jal knows best, but it perhaps may seem to be the strongest of the two, is that Imam Ahmad rahimahullah wanted to imitate the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when revelation began. And we know that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he first got the first revelation of Al-Islam, he was 40 years old. And so Al-Imam Ahmad rahimahullah wanted to begin teaching in this manner. He had two types of classes. One was an open class and one was a private class. As far as the open class is concerned, there were over 5,000 students that will come to his open class. Open class meaning it was open to the public. Anyone could come and attend that class. In that particular class, he had about 500 of his closest students writing everything that he would teach. The rest of the students, they were there to listen, to observe, to see, to hear, whatever it is they can grasp from the majlis or the gathering of Al-Imam Ahmad rahimahullah. As far as seeking knowledge in such a blessed gathering, the people used to come and they used to describe this majlis. Imagine 5,000 people and more were there. They used to describe that the majlis of Imam Ahmad was like a garden of the gardens of paradise. That there was known that they could never recall one instance when Imam Ahmad rahimahullah would mention anything about the dunya in his lectures or in his majalis al-ilm, in his gatherings of knowledge. He would never speak anything about the dunya, so everybody who'd come there, they felt that they would have a taste of the akhirah. And this is why they described it as though they were sitting in a garden of the gardens of paradise. As in terms of his private class, this is basically private sessions that he would have with specific students. Students that excelled, they would come to his home and he would teach them in a private manner. Al-Imam Ahmad rahimahullah was very strict in answering questions. He was known to say la adri. He was known to say that he does not know. When he was asked a question that he didn't have knowledge of, he did not have knowledge of, he would clearly say that he did not know. And as we've seen, this was the same for Imam Malik rahimahullah and the others. Such to the extent that Al-Imam Ahmad rahimahullah laid the 6 main conditions of a mufti, or someone who wishes to answer questions. There are at least 6 conditions that a person should have when doing so. And even up to today, scholars follow the conditions of Imam Ahmad and what they were. From them, number 1 is that a person should have ikhlas. And this is of course by default. A person should be sincere in his knowledge, sincere in what he is preaching. Part of sincerity is practice what you preach. So a person who has knowledge must be able to practice that knowledge. Number 2, and that is, along with this knowledge, they must have fahm, or they must have understanding. So it is not enough for somebody to say that I have read a book or I have studied a certain branch or a certain science, and if you ask them questions about that particular science, they have absolutely no clue how to answer the questions regarding that particular science. So they should have some fahm or understanding. Number 3 is that they should have knowledge of the questioner. Meaning that when the questioner is asking a question, the person should have knowledge and understanding of what the questioner is seeking. If it is something good or if it is something bad. Because there are times when a questioner, when they ask something, they have a hidden agenda behind them. Meaning they would like to cause some embarrassment to the speaker. They'd like to humiliate him. They'd like to show that they know something that the speaker doesn't know, etc., etc., etc. So a smart speaker or teacher, or in this case a mufti, he knows and he understands when a person is asking a question, what it is that they're seeking. And one of the most effective ways to know this is look for chain questions, questions that come one after the other. For example, a person may ask a certain question and you give them an answer, they're not satisfied with this answer. They ask another one and they're very similar, not satisfied. And they keep coming back and coming back and coming back. This is one of the ways that you can detect that a person, say, listen, this is all that I have for you. If it is not enough, the answer from this point on is, La adri, Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Number 4, from the conditions that Imam Ahmad rahimahullah put forth for a mufti, is that the person who is answering should be able to give an acceptable answer. Meaning that the answer that is given should not cause more confusion onto the questioner himself. Okay, and this happens, maybe very seldomly it happens, but the point is we have seen this happen. A question may be asked to someone, and the answer, the person is completely lost, or is even more confused than prior to asking the question. And number 5 is that the mufti should understand the questioner's situation or circumstance. This is an important condition. Understanding the situation or circumstance of the questioner, meaning you understand the people that you are talking to, and the questions they ask, you understand, you have an idea of where they come from, who they are, what country they live in, what is happening in that country. This is why today many of our ulama, rahmatullahi alayhim, when you ask them questions about something that is happening in another country, they will say to you that they can't answer this question. And when you ask them why, they will say to you exactly this. Say, I don't live in that country and I don't know the people there. So I know these things, I cannot give you an answer to this question. Okay, so this is a sunnah that many of the scholars practice even till today. And number 6 from the condition is that the mufti should of course have knowledge of the Quran and sunnah, and be able to prove whatever answer they give to anyone, especially regarding the religion of Al-Islam, they should be able to prove their statement with something that is authentic. From the students of Al-Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, we will mention some of the famous ones, and of course they are Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, Al-Imam Muslim, Al-Imam Abi Dawood rahimahullah, and many, many others. These are just some of the famous ones who eventually became leaders of the Sunnah. Also one of his sons by the name, who was the eldest son that he had, who died in the year 266, was also a great scholar. It was said that his son Salih had almost reached the level of Imam Ahmad, but not quite. This is actually the statements that scholars put forth. Almost reached there, but not quite. His father was still beyond when it came to the knowledge of Al-Islam. As far as his works are concerned, he never authored any books outside of Hadith and Sunnah. And of course his most famous collection that he put forth is the collection of his Musnad, which he started writing in the year 180. He started putting together his Musnad in the year 180, which consists of more than 20,000 ahadith in it. Now, if he put together this Musnad in the year 180, that meant that he was 16 years old when he began writing the Musnad. Subhanallah, 16 years old. He had memorized, as we mentioned, more than 1 million ahadith. And from this 1 million, he extracted ahadith that he felt was authentic according to his conditions, as well as ahadith that he thought that it would be befitting for those who were there, the people at that time, as well as the future generations to come. Of course, when we study the life and times of these scholars, we also pay heed to some of the important statements that they make, some of the important sayings of these scholars. And from Al-Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, he once stated that this world is a place of struggle and work. This is a place of hardship. And the akhirah is a place of rest and ease. Whoever does not work now will regret this later. So if a person does not put forth the effort in preparing for the akhirah, then indeed when Allah Azza wa Jal raises this person from their grave and begins to question them about everything they have done in the dunya, they respond, رَبِّ رْجِعُونِي لَعَلِّي أَعْمَلُ صَالِحًا فِي مَا تَرَكْتُ. O Allah, return me back to the dunya so that I can continue to work hard and do righteous deeds, especially those that I have missed, those that I have ignored. From the famous statements of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah is he said that when we ask for wealth, we don't get any. When we ask for wealth, we don't get it. Instead, we get what we don't ask for. This statement here, what it means is less a person asks for from Allah Azza wa Jal, and they do this in order to build sincerity in their hearts, that the only thing that they are content with is whatever Allah Azza wa Jal gives them. So instead of asking Allah Azza wa Jal for something, whatever Allah Azza wa Jal has given them, they're content and pleased with this. Realize that this person, with this attitude and this understanding, this is the person Allah Azza wa Jal will continue to increase. The dunya will be sitting in this person's hands, and they will have all the happiness and contentment of this world. And so this is how we understand the statement of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah. And one of the other statements he mentions, and this is an important one, I'm sure many of us can relate to this, meaning you can understand that we've met somebody who has this characteristic in them. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah once stated that if you meet someone who speaks a lot, be careful of that person, for that person is a dangerous person. Simply by a person who has a busy tongue, not necessarily speaking about someone or ghiba or lying, etc. No, this is not what we're talking about, or it is not restricted to only those things. But even a person just speaking in general about anything and everything. Literally, you talk about the carpet in the masjid and why it's brown. This person can sit literally for hours and discuss about the carpet and why it is brown. And you bring another dead-end topic, and you begin to discuss this topic, this person's tongue becomes busy all the time. Realize this is what the statement of Imam Ahmad rahim is speaking about. The less a person speaks, the more piety a person has, the more humiliation someone has in front of Allah Azza wa Jal. And so this is why a very famous statement that the Salaf have is that there is nothing that is worthy of being locked up more than the tongue. There's nothing that is worthy of being locked up, put into a cell, put into a jail, more than the tongue. And as we know, the Salaf rahmatullahi alayhim, they were to such the extent that they were able to count every single word they spoke in an entire week. How many people do we know can actually count all the words they say in 1 hour or in 1 day? Now, we are not saying that a person should be at this level where in the entire week they count that they've spoken 10, 20 words. No. But rather, the tongue is something must have control. It must not be left loose, but it should be or should have some type of control to it. Some of the statements of the Salaf rahmatullahi alayhim about Imam Ahmad. From them, Abu Hatim rahimahullah once stated that if I ever seen a man who loves Imam Ahmad, then I know that that person loves someone from Jannah. We know that that person loves a person from the Jannah. And also another statement from the scholars and from the Salaf, they describe that Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, his fragrance felt as though it was a fragrance from paradise, the perfume that he would wear. The words and the eloquency of his Arabic and the way he would speak, they felt as though they were to a unique creation of Allah Azza wa Jal. And so anybody who was around him, there used to be a crowd that would walk with Imam Ahmad. Wherever he would go, you would know that there was a swarm of people that would follow him. Rahmatullahi alayhim. And then we will come, inshallah, and conclude very quickly his description. It was said that Imam Ahmad was very tall. He was a fair-skinned person. He used to wear thick clothing all the time, as well as a turban on his head. It was said that even though he wore the turban, he would take a scarf and throw it on top of the turban as well. And these are some of the descriptions you can find in his Musnad. He used to eat very little. He loved fruits. There is a statement that he loved watermelon. He was known for his patience and his beauty. He was a very handsome man. It was also said that he would speak unless he was spoken to. He was known for saying, "I don't know." He also used to help the poor, the weak, the elderly, and many, many other characteristics of him. He was humble. He was soft. He was a soft-hearted person. When he asked what softens the heart, he said, "Eat halal foods." This is one of the things that softens the heart, is that you eat halal foods. He used to pray, subhanallah, he used to pray more than 300 raka'at a day. And when he was sick, he would pray 150 raka'at a day. This is the days that he was sick. And it was said that he used to finish the Quran every week. At least every 6 or 7 days, he would finish the entire Quran. And then we come to the death of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah. That all of these A'imma have in common is that, of course, he became very sick. But he had never become sick enough that he couldn't pray and stand up and do the movements of Salah. It was said that his students still narrated that they could still see him, even though that he was sick. They could still see him praying. And Imam Ahmad rahimahullah used to sit by himself and think about the akhirah a lot. So much so that he used to sit and think about it and begin to tear himself all the time. It was said that Imam Ahmad rahimahullah had 3 strands of hair, 3 strands of hair that belonged to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he would carry this hair. He would have a pouch that was strapped around his back, and in that pouch is where he would keep 3 strands of hairs that belonged to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He died in the state of wudu. He eventually was so weak that he could not leave his home. And of course, we conclude by stating that Al-Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, he died on the day of Jum'ah. And it was said that there were tens of thousands of people who came and attended his funeral. And he is now buried in Baghdad. Al-Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala died at the age of 77. Died at the age of 77. And having said that, brothers and sisters, let us do a quick recap. Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, who was born in the year 80 and died in the year 150. And he was 70 years old. Al-Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala, born in the year 93, died in the year 179, and he was 86 years old. Al-Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, born in the year 150, died in the year 204, and he was the youngest out of the 4 Imams, and he was 54 years old. And then we have just concluded with Al-Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, who was born in the year 164, died in the year 241, and he was 77 years old. And having said that, brothers and sisters, I wish to leave you with a few points as to why it is important for us to study the life and times of the Salaf and the great scholars of the past. For one of the #1 reasons why we do this, and is that it is an increasement of our Iman, is when we watch and we study the lives of these men and women in the past who have gone and preserved the ilm of al-Islam, and who have struggled and gone through punishments and torture for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. This of itself is an increasement of our faith. For we begin to appreciate this religion. We begin to appreciate al-Islam. We begin to appreciate the length that these people have gone through to preserve this knowledge. We also learn by studying the life and times of the Salaf. We learn and see how Islam is practiced, to the extent that these men and these women have gone and practiced al-Islam, that nothing would stand in front of their way, that regardless what they have done, regardless of what punishment or what torture or what hardship they would go through, at the end of the day, it was only them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we briefly touched on, you have an appreciation to see how these people have sacrificed their health, their wealth, their time, their families, their children. They've sacrificed these people for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. And so all of these things eventually lead us to appreciating this religion, appreciating Al-Islam, and appreciating those who have struggled and fought for the religion of Allah Azza wa Jal. And having said that, brothers and sisters, the source that I have used to compile the life and times of these four Imams is a book which is written in Arabic entitled Al-A'immatul Arba'a by Dr. Ahmad al-Sharbasi, who is a teacher in Egypt at the very moment. Allahu A'lam, I don't know if he's still alive or not. However, this is it's a one-volume book. I'm not sure if it's available here. This is the source that I have used to compile this information to you. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that whatever has been said in the last few weeks of our time together to be something that is beneficial to us and to our families, and not something that will punish us in this dunya or in the akhirah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to increase us in knowledge and understanding of the most beautiful and perfect way of life, the life of Al-Islam. And these are the words that I leave you with. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.